societal and psychological impacts of those things are as I think rightly said, incalculably serious. So if we don't get cracking on this, we face truly calamitous possible options. Finally, do you appreciate you bringing this up, because we are speaking, as we record this program, on the eve of the No Kings events scheduled to take place around this country. Word about, we know about the people bringing us this initiative and the groups that are participating in it, and the extent to which this too may prove to be a very concerted attack on our country, by people working with or for outfits like the United Front Work Department of the Chinese Communist Party, and how this could, in a sense, be a virus inside America, not a literal, one, but very much a subversive force. If indeed it proves out not to be, just one very bad day of thousands, if not a larger number of events of this kind, but a ongoing effort to really subvert the United States from within.
Yes, Frank. No, this No Kings protest this weekend will certainly be an effort to divide the United States, to tear us apart, to see whether they can provoke any kind of confrontations with the police. And where there's, like in Southern California, where I live and where Karen lives, the National Guard or the Marines that have been sent here to protect certain federal structures, including the ICE agencies. Anna Paulina Luna this morning on Steve Bannon's War Room, our colleague, talked about this guy Singham, who is an agent of the CCP and pouring a great deal of money into the No Kings effort. And she wants the Congress to investigate it. They're calling to subpoena him, and if he doesn't show up, to arrest him if he enters the United States. Or I don't know if they can extradite him, but regardless, to highlight the fact that this is foreign money going into these operations here in this country with the sole purpose
and CCP tied, as you say.
Yes, no, he's a clear. This is CCP money going into the United States to create this. I will. We're not only a week and a half away from Tiananmen Square in 1989. Mm-hmm. There was the case of mass unrest that was put down violently. The irony or coincidence, you mentioned Shi Haoxin, and Shi Haoxin was the one who gave the speech on the bioweapons and how the CCP could use bioweapons to destroy the United States, and that was very serious. It was also, I'm not sure you remember this, Frank, but it was also Shi Haoxin who was in charge at the time in 1989 of putting down the uprising in Tiananmen Square.
I did not know that.
He was responsible for that. Yeah. He was head of he was part of the general staff, but specifically assigned to put that down the way he did. And he was rewarded for that. Putting down the demonstration as violently as he did and as demonstratively as he did was a thing for which he was promoted.
Yeah. Good career
so
move.
The Chinese like this idea of putting down and suppressing anybody who puts their head up on behalf of freedom.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Shi Haoxin was also involved in that. This agroterrorism business is something I think, we have to take seriously given the weakness we're in right now. We have a strong president, and that's a good thing. And he's still in the building, in the part of his plan to rebuild the country. And so he needs to be supported. I was a little irritated, I will say, at first when I heard about all these Chinese students coming back to the country. But I think at their high point, there was like 400,000, 420,000 in the United States. And they yielded around $40 billion in revenue to the United States. So I can see where the president might have thought, well, you know, this is just money. They're coming here for an education. They want to pay for it. That's fine. It's also the case that almost all of these, you know, students coming are the children of the members of the Chinese Communist Party, which is interesting. So they send their kids to the United States. Xi Jinping's own daughter, I believe, lives in somewhere in the Northeast. You read about the armed guards around her all the time. But it's interesting, I think, from the president's point of view, that we might have 200, 300, 400,000 children of the Chinese Communist Party in the United States. And I'm sure the president made a calculation, a commonsensical calculation, as it were, that the Chinese might be less inclined to attack the United States if their children are here going to school, right? Not that we have, you know, we'll have 300,000 hostages in the United States, but the Chinese may be less inclined to go kinetic against us in a way if their children are going to school here. And the president will also think it's up to us to make sure they don't steal our intellectual property, which they have stolen over the last, you know, at least decade, more certainly, at a pace of around $500 to $600 billion a year from the United States. Well, I think the president would think that's on us. It's our job to make sure they don't steal our intellectual property. And so we, the United States, are going to have to do a much better job at counterintelligence than we have been. And if there are 300,000 Chinese students, the children of the Chinese Communist Party, here on American soil, well, that'll be something we have to live with in the short run. But again, that's transactional. They're going to pay money, and they're going to be here, living here in the United States. Let me close, though, Frank, with this simple idea that the FBI charge against these two researchers was of an agroterrorism nature. They called this fungus a potential agroterrorism weapon. Well, let's take that one step further. Is the CCP now engaged in terrorism, actual terrorism against the United States? If so, it's up to this administration to declare them a terrorist state. If they're going to engage in agroterrorism, key word there is terrorism. And again, we're trying to find sensible ways of thinking about all these things. I would offer in how we get serious about this to listen to our own words. Our own country says they're engaged in agroterrorism against us. Mm-hmm. These people have invaded the country. They look to be of military age, these 100,000 Chinese nationals. They're not operating in good faith right now, the Chinese Communist Party. They never do.
Yes.
And we know that. President Trump knows that. We need to develop and help President Trump develop policies that will actually reflect the seriousness that we ourselves say and believe about what it is they're doing to us. And so this webinar has been one of a series of over 100 now that try to highlight the seriousness of all this. And I don't think it could come at a more important time, Frank.
Quibble, but who's counting? I think we're over 210 actually all in. Another calibration point, and it's very helpful, Brian. I did not know that General Zhihao Chen, however you pronounce it, was one of the perpetrators of the Tiananmen Square. Another was that fellow that I mentioned,
Yes.
Secretary of the